What's going on, you guys? My name is Cody Thixton, and this is an interesting podcast coming to you guys live on November 18th, 2025 for episode 117, where today we actually have a very special guest. And now it is an absolute honor to introduce to you guys Slammin Sammy.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Cody. How are you?
I'm doing very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Nice. Well, let's just start out for all people who maybe don't know you. Maybe you can introduce your name, where you're from, and how long you've been in pro wrestling.
So my name is Slammin Sammy. I am from Dunbar, PA, which is 50 miles south of Pittsburgh and all that. So
Interesting. All right. Well, so like, when did you start watching professional wrestling? Was there a specific time period?
honestly, I started watching pro wrestling when I was about like 3 years old. So probably since I was like a little kid, because it started off initially like with my dad watching it all the time before I ever was introduced to it. When I was born at 3 years old, he ended up putting it on the TV for me, and I started watching it from there. And obviously, I didn't know at 3 years old watching, as most 3 year olds probably wouldn't know. but somehow in that way it ended up being the rest of my life.
That is so interesting. So I know you had posted on Facebook about your falling in love with pro wrestling. Can you kind of walk us through like exactly the aspects that made you love it so much?
I I I fell in love with wrestling whenever I was little. I fell in love when I was like about like 7 years old. So it's been like at least over a decade since I loved wrestling. Put it that way. I loved it from a very young age. Just like it was something that I knew I loved in that moment. Something I knew I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I mean, I remember even telling my parents. I mean, and again, I'm 7, so I have no intellectual thought. So I just say, hey, I want to be a pro wrestler. And my dad was over the moon, and my mom was supportive as well. So I mean, that also that not only that, but also contributes, like watching my favorite wrestlers over the years, which were the Shield and Seth Rollins. A lot of stuff played into that.
Yeah. Well, before we actually get into your love of pro wrestling or favorite wrestlers, how was it for you when you were actually like, you know what, I want to go out and I want to try this. I'm going to give this a shot to see if it's something I can do.
For me that shot, I feel like in a way it was like, it might sound cliche, but I feel like in a way it was meant to be. I mean, I especially, again, going back to 7-year-old me, knowing at 7, that's like the one. It's like the one thing that I could never, that I could imagine. This is the one thing I could imagine myself doing, for the rest of my life, and it's something I very, very much want to do it, for the rest of my life, and I feel like, that 7-year-old still speaks inside of the 19-year-old version of Sammy and Slammin Sammy both at the same time, because it's like, I love this. I want to do it. I want to do it forever. I want to be the one that's that's in their deathbed saying, "Yep, I did everything I wanted to do in my wrestling career fully to the fullest." So
That is so interesting. So before we actually get into your training, what were some of your favorite wrestlers maybe growing up?
my favorite wrestlers, as we were talking about earlier, like thing for me initially was honestly the Shield. Whenever they first got introduced, I was very much hooked on that, and it's unique in a way to be hooked on free men as a young female at the age of like probably 6 years old. This was probably even before I was 7. So when you put it that way, in a way it's kind of weird, but for me, I knew like like the feeling was very much right for me. And then moving on as I aged, my favorite wrestler over time ended up becoming Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins is my favorite, and I can think of many of the reasons why I latched onto him at such a young age, because of self-esteem, power, presence, anything that you think a pro wrestler would need in general.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. So, like, where did you actually train at? Can you kind of give us a little clue on who exactly trained you?
So, so I was trained by a guy in Uniontown, PA, by the name of Brandon K. He trains me at the Stronghold Training Center. That's also in Uniontown, PA. So that's where I've trained, and honestly, it's a great training center. It's a great training center, for me to learn. And he especially is great, at wrestling. And sometimes I think to myself, that's hard nowadays for people to find a good training center to teach all this stuff, because this stuff is hard. This stuff is not easy, especially as you keep going into it and progress. So yeah, that's where I trained, and it's a wonderful training facility and center.
That is so interesting. Well, you had just talked about how difficult it was, going throughout the training. How was it during your first day? Was it more than you expected, or did you kind of understand prior to actually starting that this is what I'm going to have to do?
Well, on my first day, I do remember being a bit, being a bit nervous, but I remember telling myself, if this is what you want to do, you gotta be the person to put to put your foot in the door. You know what I mean? That has to be you, both mentally and physically. So I remember doing that. I mean, I knew from like a standpoint of like training and like cardio and stuff. I knew I was going to be good with that, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, so this will be one thing that no matter what, that will stay with me. I hope it stays with me. um I'm 19, about to be 20, so hope it stays with me, because that's important to me, the longevity and all. But I remember on my first day, just being enamored about all that goes into the pro wrestling business. Because when you're just a fan and watching, I don't think you really understand. If you ever heard this saying, like, you don't know what that's actually like until you go actually and do it, then yeah, in this case, that's where it pretty much applies. So I didn't understand it pretty much as a fan until I actually got in the ring and started doing it. And that's what I loved. I loved figuring this stuff, trying to figure this stuff out, which obviously I didn't really figure out too much, just starting. But as I went along, you figure stuff out, and you find out things that you didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, how was it for you when you actually took your first bump? Were you expecting the canvas to be as hard as it was?
I definitely was expecting, the impact, because for me, I'm one of those aggressive types. I'm one of those like aggressive, hard hitting types. So I fully did in a way expect the canvas to feel in the way of how it feels. And also
Mhm.
I've had, in my background, I've had like 7 years of martial arts and jiu-jitsu. So I kind of had a base for for like in a way what a bump was like. I mean, I had to relearn and do a bump obviously, but honestly I love the bump. I love the impact and stuff. As I talked about before, I'm very aggressive and into the hard hitting action. So yeah, it was great for me.
Yeah. So how was it like having that previous experience and then kind of integrating that into professional wrestling? How was that for you?
For me, like what was more of the adjustment wasn't, like the physical attributes, because I knew that would, in a way, I know that in a way would like stay with me. I'd say the biggest transformation from there is being an entertainer, because that's what our business is all about. You have to be, an entertainer. You have to be a character. You have to sell. You have to tell a story, and be part, and make a good storyline in a way. And you have to do that. And in many ways that's hard. In many ways too, that's hard to transfer from something that's not so, entertainer based, and go to something that is entertainment based in a way. I mean, for me, I think that was the biggest thing, and it was hard for me in the beginning to kind of get that. But in a way, I felt like then over time it just got, I figured it out more, and it got more easier for me. So I'd say, that's one of the hardest like changes for me.
Yeah. So like how long was it into your training that they were like, okay, I think you're ready for a show? Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
So I actually started training at my training center when I was 15, which was an exception, because usually my teacher at the time didn't let people in the door unless they were 18. So I thank him very much for that. Honestly, that's huge. But I started training at 15, and I remember my mindset being like, okay, if I start now, then by the time I turn 18, I can just jump right in, head first and take the dive, which in many ways it worked, because I had so many years of experience and got in so many years of training. When I finally was ready for a match, my debut for my train centers company, which is called Rise Pro Wrestling, was in April. I was taking on a woman by the name of Laura Lovelace, and honestly, my debut night felt like a fairy tale. I mean, it sounds cliche and a bit cheesy, but it's true. It honestly, it honestly did. It was one of the happiest nights, of my life, especially starting off in my career. My trainer was very proud of me, and everybody, who was in my circle was very proud of me, especially my parents. They support me to dear God's death. So
Yeah. That is so fascinating. So when you were actually got word like, okay, on this night at this time, we're actually going to debut you. How nervous were you going into that match? And like, how did you kind of shake off that nervousness before actually heading out to your first ever ready match?
I honestly was because the nerves built in like in the day before, because like, well, the days before, rather than, so because I didn't know like exactly until they told me, this is happening. So in a way, the nerves started to build up, but I don't think in a way those nerves got to me until day of the show. I mean, I honestly was very excited, and I am beyond the opinion that if you're not nervous, you don't care.
Yeah.
That's just to me what it seems like. If you're not nervous, I don't think you care. In many ways, I would say yes, very much so. I was nervous, but when I got out there, I put on my face, and I was like, okay, cool as a cucumber, cool as a cucumber. Let's go. So
Yeah.
yeah, I did that. But once I got out there, and I seen, like my parents, and like my other loved ones, or people who have been supporting me, you know, through it, through it all, that just really, made it better for me as a whole.
That is so fascinating. So, like, how was it actually being able to perform in front of your um, said parents or whatever? Did you feel like it was kind of a more of a pressure for you to be able to actually perform in front of them?
Yes, I feel like in a way, like just like especially just starting out, there was a certain pressure with performing. I mean, I'm sure that especially can come to about to every it could come about to everyone in a way. I mean, and how it felt for me going out there to perform in front of my loved ones and all the fans out there, it just felt like amazing. I mean, especially to hear the crowd like roar for me, if you know what I mean. Yeah, and it was something that I don't ever take for granted, and I love that feeling, and I still love that feeling when I very much go out to this day. And and sometimes you don't know what they're going to do, and you don't know what they're going to do, what are they going to do, this that, there's many. But for me it was an amazing feeling, and especially to feel like I was enough in a way, especially cuz I have a very like closed personality. I'm very like in a way like quiet and introvert, even though I don't sound like that now. I mean that's pretty much been like something of my whole life. I didn't know if I could burst out of that bubble, but the first kick was me, so I was like then I finally kicked that away, and I was like okay. I'm like, so I really can do it in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you feel like when you were able to express to your parents or loved ones that this is something that you want to do, that they were really um, just happy for you or really pushed you to do the exact level in which you want to do it?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, at 7 years old, I had no, yeah. There's no mind. I had no mindset in my brain like, oh, I'm gonna plan. When I tell, I'm gonna plan to tell. No, I just blurted out and said it. So my parents have been very, supportive of me throughout my career. They're very loving for me, especially for my dad, because he loves it so much too. He loved it before I was born, and in a way he wanted to do it at a young age, but he never got to that because he had other things coming up and he wanted to do those. So I think for him, in a way, it's very much like, because he thought, oh, I'll never get a chance to see the wrestling business again, but I feel like he gets to live that now through me. He just gets to support his kid. And honestly, my mom is the most loving mom in the world. And her, along with my dad, have helped me come up with the ideas for my character, regarding merch and everything else. So they're very much a great support system and helping me with that. And I'm best friends with both my mother and my father equally, and my grandfather.
That is really awesome. Well, we'll definitely have to get into your character development a little bit more. So, how do you feel that 2025 has helped you as Slammin Sammy?
I feel like 2025 for me in over for sure has been amazing, because I've had a lot of ups and I've had a lot of downs, and I've had a lot of, times where my eyes have opened properly in this business, because I don't think, at 15 years old, my eyes were open to some of the things that have happened to me, good or bad, because sometimes you don't realize that's happening, around you, whether it's the people or something else. Mainly the people sometimes, because sometimes people aren't very they're not very nice. Let's put it that way. Sometimes people are not very nice. But I mean, I feel like in ways I've had my eye openers, and I've had my, oh yeah, that's what I thought type of moments. But overall, I felt like it's been pretty much for me an amazing year, and I hope it keeps getting better from here.
Yeah, okay. So, like, what is the one thing that you actually accomplished in 2025 that you're most proud of?
So the one thing that I'm definitely going to say that I'm definitely definitely proud of is I did this 21 men rumble, and the last guy I threw out, and oh gosh, I have to say his name, and it's hilarious. They called him the queer hillbilly from Pound Town. That was literally his name. So, but yeah, it was very it was yeah, it was very good, and honestly, it was a great thing for me in my career, because honestly, I wanted to prove in a way too that I could, hang with anybody. It didn't matter to me, female or male. In a way, I wanted to prove that, you could put the win on me. You know what I mean? And I feel like that night I did that. And honestly, I thank that promotion forever for giving me a chance at a win, because sometimes people don't really give people chances, especially, because they look at somebody who's like a young young 19-year-old. Sometimes, like, I get a lot, like, people, like, I think sometimes, a lot of times, that people doubt me, and I'm like, wait a minute. Don't doubt me because I'm young and think I have, like, nothing in a way, or I can't bring anything to the table. Let me, give me the opportunity to show you what I can bring to the table in a way. So yeah, I would say that's my biggest and proudest moment.
That is so fascinating. So I know one thing I wanted to ask you about is, like, what is one of your biggest pet peeves in a wrestling ring, whether it be you working with whoever? What is something that you're like, I need this aspect to be brought, otherwise it's kind of a pet peeve in a little bit.
Goodness. And in a way, there's a lot of things that you could say that are pet peeve, like people that are untrained, or anything else, because that honestly is like one of the pet peeves for me. But honestly, like, my pet peeve is, like, honestly, when people bring the real life issues into the ring, especially, like, when it's somebody you don't get along with, and they just want to, like, ruin you, and they just want to, like, ruin your career, or like, and, like, bully you in front of people. To me, that's just not being a professional, and not keeping it out of the way.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I hate it. I mean, it's one of the things that triggered my mental health at one point. It honestly did. And, mental health's important to me in that way. But yeah, I hate it, like, when like females, or anybody for that matter, start they start that kind of trouble, because they don't like somebody, or they're jealous of somebody. Again, leave that stuff at the door. We're not in high school anymore.
Yeah.
And that's and ironically, I'd say that to myself after high school. I'm like, oh, all this is over. And I'm like, nope. I'm like, it's not over. Turns out it just got a little bit worse. I'm like, darn. But yeah, I'd say that's one of my biggest pet peeves there.
Okay. Well, like, what was one of your favorite matches that you've ever performed in your career, where you're like, that kind of symbolizes what I want to bring to the ring? Do you have a specific one?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite match that I've had, like, performed. This one was very recently. I performed one match against a girl by the name of Lucy. Honestly, it was a great match, especially for me, and that match was later in the evening, because I had two matches that night, because the one show was during the day, and then the other one was at night. So I just, zoomed from that show to the next. And honestly, it was a great match in a way. It made me feel very, very good about myself. Not saying that every match I don't feel good about myself, but there are those matches where I feel like I've done very good, or I looked very impressive, or I looked very brutal, or etc.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to ask you was like, is there any wrestler that you have kind of faced where you felt like maybe they were underrated based off of their performance that you guys were both doing?
Goodness, there's honestly like a lot of ones. I will say somebody who I don't think like really much doesn't get their flowers, and I mean it's a woman that I know by the name of Autumn Breeze, and honestly she's like a second like one of my best mentors to me in a way, and she's very great. Sometimes I feel like she don't get the credit that she deserves because sometimes she's older than me. I mean she's older than me, but I feel like because we around here like all of us who know her, we do a good job giving her credit and what's so much. But I think some people don't in a way because they just see like an older lady, and I'm like no, I'm like wait a minute, I'm like that old, I'm like that lady can do some stuff. Come on now.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So, like, can you kind of walk us through you winning your first ever championship and how did it make you feel when you actually were able to accomplish, or maybe like, what are the steps in which a professional wrestler has to take to be able to actually achieve their first championship?
Honestly, for me, when I won my first won my first championship off of a guy. So for me, it was a very amazing feeling, especially especially getting to beat a guy for it. Because how many people could say, "Hey, I beat a guy for a belt." I feel good. How how many can say that? But honestly, I felt like it was a great opportunity for me to win that belt and prove to people that that I can carry that title and that I can, be that person that they want to be in a way. And honestly, it was amazing because it was a, it was a great match for me and the guy that I was facing. And we were, preparing for it. We put together very well and ended up turning out to be a very great night. Hey, say one of my, happiest moments of my career. It definitely helped my confidence in many ways to heights where, it wasn't before. So yeah, I mean, it was just a great moment. And the people, who know how long that I've worked, to get there. Because it's been a very long road. I'll tell you that very much right now. Because, because it's not always easy getting there. But in a way, they all know the hardship that I went through, how much I've done to get to that moment. And steps I would say for that are honestly, like getting into the business and like learning a lot because they do that, to learn like, your repertoire. Like especially like when you're first out starting, like for me, I lost a lot. And I think it's a shame that some wrestlers are saying, they don't want to lose or they don't want to take the pin. I'm like, please. I'm like, just take the pin. I'm like, no offense. I ain't trying to be offensive to anybody, but like, just take the loss. And, what matters is, the experience, especially when you're starting out and what you learn from being in the ring with a typical person, who's been in there, longer than you. And for
Yeah.
me, in many ways, that's, and for me, especially too, it was putting the work in for for myself in a way. So I felt like for me, that's what led up to that, moment for me and putting in the work and to prove that that, that even when losing as well as winning, I can still look good, in a way. And two, that comes from, me remaining the same person that I've always been. I've made that vow to myself to be the same humble human being in a way that I've always been that I don't think people always keep when they're wrestling because, it's like when people like get into that ring and then like characters they start going like they go off and they have their success and they completely disregard stuff like like training or whatnot. And we'll get to that later, but for me I feel like that's always a priority and it always will be. You have to keep learning and growing and getting better every day. So
Yeah.
So all that too.
Yeah, I know that there was one time in which I was interviewing Drexel, and we were both talking about that professional wrestling doesn't owe you anything. But if you can put yourself in the spot where a company actually wants you to be champion or be somebody that is a representative, how was that for you whenever you were actually giving that opportunity?
For me, that opportunity for me, I mean, it felt amazing. It felt like the hard work that I've been through, has paid off in a way. And I felt like, and I felt like, they were doing great by me by taking like a chance on me, because some people don't want to take their chances on some young talent. Sometimes they don't want to take chances like that, but I'm like, you just give me the ball, and I'll run for it in a way. I mean, it was great for me given to be given that chance. And honestly, I'm out now here running around here with this belt, and I honestly think it's the best thing. I hold it close to my heart in a way. So
Yeah, that is so fascinating. So, throughout your entire career in all of the companies that you've worked for, what has been your number one company that you were actually most proud of being able to wrestle for?
gee, my number one company, there's so many great companies out. So when I say my number one company, I don't want any other companies to throw anything at me, okay? I generally love working for all of them, so I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. My number one pick here, I don't want that to affect my relationship with other companies here. But 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 I would say the number one company for me personally has been the company that honestly has given me my belt, and that is PCWA in Schuylkill Haven, because they are such an amazing company. They're all like in the back, especially very very nice people to me, and they make me happy, and I feel like in a way that they want to talk in a way and have a good time too, because that's the other thing too, because sometimes you could feel out of place in some companies, where they feel like they don't make you feel welcome, or you don't, or nobody talks to you in a way. But I feel like for me, they made me feel very welcoming, and and for me, it felt like they had a lot of them in the back there had my back, and honestly have sang praises for me, which, and I genuinely appreciate all their support, or otherwise I wouldn't be in this moment carrying this title for them, because honestly, in a way, that's also too because of people behind the scenes, and not only that, but because of the fans too, and just more in a way, they very make me feel very welcome, and that I belong. And they do a lot of promoting for women too, so they're very much in a way for women's wrestling, and I see that everywhere, and I love that, honestly, because I feel like we need to keep that growing, and we need to keep that evolving time and time.
Yeah. So, how is it for you whenever you are backstage at whatever pro wrestling company and you're kind of interacting with the other wrestlers on, like, let's do this in the ring, let's bring this aspect? How is it kind of coordinating with everybody and just knowing what they want to bring, but also you being able to put your 2 cents in?
Right. Well, in many ways, you want to all you worry about so many things. Like, you don't want to like come across off as like snarky or anything, especially too, because in a way, like when I was first starting out, being in there with veterans, like you wanted to be entail what you think would be what you think would be a great idea. And I always tell people I'm not a veteran, but what about this, in a way,
Mhm.
because I try to insert my opinion without being like, oh, if they have a better idea, then I'll listen to that. I mean, in a very much ways, it was hard. It was very hard for me too, because I because well, personally, this is for a lot of people that know me, but if you don't, I am somebody who really like suffers from like social anxiety and stuff, and like I talked about before, being very introverted and stuff. I've suffered from like stuff like social anxiety throughout the years that like I feel like, like in many ways when I've had like conversations like some words just weren't coming out right, or like, I felt like I wasn't explaining clearly or not being, loud enough and all that thing too, which in a way can very much make you feel like you're not doing up to the expectation because you have like this mental block. But I think over time when I started, nipping that in the butt, which was kind of, very hard in a way when I started nipping it and finally, interacting, the way I should. And part of that too relies on, good and nice, kind people, which is a hard thing to find. Because, especially in a business, it takes your problems and multiplies it by 10. The pro wrestling business does. So,
yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, I feel like my interactions have gone better. And I've also started to have conversations with people around me. And I feel like that's helped me so much. And I've helped myself with my own social anxiety. So, in a way, I feel like I've grown and I've gotten better over the years with my interactions, especially with, telling people like, hey, let's do this and that. And I feel confident about telling them all that. And then they feel confident telling me their ideas and so forth. So I feel like now the interactions I do are very great,
Yeah. Well, I know I was sitting there and I was talking with this guy named Draven Vargas. And one thing I wanted to ask you was like, is there that specific aspect of professional wrestling that maybe not even the fans know about what you have to go through as a professional wrestler in order to perform?
I feel like honestly that there is. And I feel like sometimes fans in a way don't understand like what goes on behind the scenes in a way too, which in a way
Yeah.
makes it very hard when you're trying to explain to people like, in a ways of like what you've been through, because there's so much, we talk about the physical toll, but I think too enough we should talk about, the mental toll too, like the mental toll that it can take on your mind, because, and especially like I said before, wrestling takes problems and multiplies them by 10. That's literally what, in a way, what it does. Because I remember going through stuff up here that was so bad that I was like going through like a period where it was like a slump. But in a way, I've had to dig myself out of that, and it took a long time, because honestly, it's not easy to go through stuff, because sometimes in your mind because your mind, you can't turn off your mind. Sometimes you talk very hateful to yourself, and low self-esteem can kick in too at times, and that just, in a way, it very much makes wrestling fully harder. because I've I hate to say it, but sometimes I've wrestled with a broken mind and heart at times. I literally have. Or like, one time at time it was an intermission. It was probably at the start of when I started doing my mental spiral here. I had to go back out for intermission after I was, upset, and put on like the smile, like, oh, everything's fine. But when in reality up here, it was like not. I mean, that was just one time. And after that I was like, all right, it was very dark. But in a way though, I'm so glad in a way to climb out of it and retrieve myself. Think not only the negative too, but also, I don't think they understand like the good times too, like how good it is to, feel like you've got into a certain position, or you got a certain opportunity, or how you feel that somebody somebody, recommend you or something. Just small things like that, whether it's good or bad. I just feel like in a way that's something that they, that they wouldn't understand, and you'd have to get behind the scenes or get in the ring to experience it fully together.
Yeah. Well, to kind of go along with that, like who was somebody in your career that has actually helped you the most, whether it be overcoming like the mentality or kind of understanding what a wrestler has to do? Is there anybody in significance that you can say really helped you kind of drive yourself?
In many ways, somebody who's been like a mentor to me, and I'll say her name again because I feel like I've loved her from the beginning. Her name is Autumn Breeze. I felt like in many ways she's helped me so much throughout my career, being the veteran that she was too. And she's, very, and in a way she's very nice. So, that's one thing too, because again, like I said, some people are not, the nicest, but in a way, she was somebody who was very pivotal into helping me, feel better about myself in many ways, in shape or form. And obviously, with the addition of my parents and family, which obviously they helped me too feel better about myself in a way. But somebody, in the wrestling business too, like Autumn, who very much helps me out, through my career, and has helped me feel like, I can do it. And, like, hey, you might be, might be, young, and you might be, fresh out there, but doesn't mean, you don't get to have, your opportunity, or you don't get to be treated with the same respect in a way. So I feel like she was a very pivotal person in my career and has helped me out a ton.
That is so awesome. Well, I know, like, noticed that when I was actually scrolling throughout your Facebook page or whatever, that you're debuting for like a lot of different companies for the first time. So, how was it to be able to step into environments in which you're really showcasing yourself for the first time? How was it actually stepping into those environments for the very first time?
Very much, it's very great, to be honest, in a way, because in a way I get to be around like new promoters and new people, and people that in a way could potentially help me out in my career. And I feel like too it's good for me and good for my brand, especially as a wrestler, to for myself to be out there, to be out and at these places and keep working, and in a way keep traveling, because yes, the hours are long, but in a way, if you love this, you're willing to do it in every way, shape or possible. And honestly, am I do I still get a little bit of nerves? Yeah, but I now mentally, like, in a way, I think I have the right mindset to where I can control anything, whether it be nerves or social anxiety, etc., stuff like that. I feel like I can pretty much help and like work with on myself, especially because I know myself now, so much, so much, very much so, in a way. And honestly, it's amazing because I get to, I try to get to form conversations and talk to people, in which in a way I'm very, proud of myself at the end of the day for forming conversations with people, because it may sound dumb to like an average person who's not been through the stuff. But I text my parents all the time, like, hey, I had a conversation with so and so, and they're like, oh, that's great. And I'm like, yeah. So being able to have these interactions with people in a way, make my day, especially at a new promotion. And it makes me too feel better from a standpoint of, I feel like, hey, I'm moving up. I'm getting, in a way closer to where I want to be. So in a way, that's how that all, feels for me.
That is so fascinating. So, like, what was like one fan interaction that you had that really sticks out in your mind, where you were like this is what I strive to have?
Goodness, my favorite fan interaction has to be whenever I won my title belt down at PCWA. I won the title belt and I went to hold it up, and then two young little girls came in there and started hugging me, and in a way it was like they were hugging me. I bent, and I was down on a knee so I could hug them and all that stuff, and to me it was just very amazing. And that's kind of what I want to be. In a way, I want to be like, in a way, very much inspiring to all these little kids, because I mean, me personally, I just love little kids. I do. I very much love children. I mean, I always try to interact with them, every time I see them, because honestly, what if we can make them into the future, of something, and and they can become that somebody, and they're like, oh, if this girl can do it, I can do it. So in a way, it was my favorite interaction for me, and I felt loved, especially by these two young ladies, because they were so happy and so proud, and they still greet me to this day with wonderful joy and in adulation. So in a way, that's my favorite interaction, and I'm still glad in a way to have that with them.
That is so awesome. Well, is there any stipulation matches that you would like to actually accomplish throughout your career?
Oh goodness, there are so many stipulation match. Like I recently did like a last woman standing match. So that for me in a way was very awesome. I mean, I think I'd love some stuff like a false count, anywhere match. That would very much be a great opportunity to have. Very much a great opportunity to have. And also things like, fatal like four ways, because in a way I haven't been chance to get into a fatal four way. So in a way, it would be the match stipulations like that would be like a great opportunity for me, beyond the point, and rumbles, which I very much do enjoy, because a lot of times those have their moments, even though I've already been in a couple rumbles. Just want to be in more. but yeah, I want to be in more. And I've heard of, and one thing I've wanted to do too is like a strap match. So with the straps. So I mean, I think that would pretty much be fun. All those match stipulations would pretty much be fun, and just the uniqueness of putting them all together in wrestling and so forth.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I actually give you the last three questions that I have for you, where can everybody find you on social media?
So my social media page on Facebook is just plain and simple Slammin Sammy. My Instagram is at Slammin Sammy official, and then my Twitter. My Twitter's down, but still trying to get it up so I can use it. It's at Slammin Sammy, and my TikTok is at Slammin Sammy 101. So if you want to find me on there, I'm constantly posting stuff and constantly, promoting and whatnot. So yeah.
That is awesome. So, what exactly do you want to accomplish in 2026?
Gee, goodness, there is so much honestly to accomplish. I mean, honestly, I want to accomplish so much more. I want to travel more to different places, and in different areas of the world, and wrestle. I obviously want to keep having more success in the wrestling business. I want to keep having good matches that can help me, move up in a way to that next level where I need to. And in many ways, maybe not just for this year, but in general, one day I'm doing all this because I want to be signed. I want to be signed to like a big wrestling company, matter if it be WBA, AEW, or TNA, whatever wrestling companies out there, because there's so many out there that we could end up being on, and you never know. So those are the things that I like to accomplish, and just keep being successful, and to keep being healthy too in general. the pro wrestling business, both physically and mentally, especially. So
that is so fascinating. So what can we expect from the future of Slammin Sammy?
well, expect slamming things like oh my goodness, but expect for me to be better up here, mentally, to have a better mindset, to have a better outlook on things, and better way of communicating to myself up in here, and better, me being better with interacting too with fans or anything what so forth, going forward. Just expect big things with Slammin Sammy, because you never know what she's gonna do next. So
That is so fascinating. All right. Well, if you could kind of tell us, just to end everything out, what does you being a professional wrestler mean to you?
being a pro wrestler to me is everything. It's my whole entire life. It's my heart, soul, and my whole body. And I could never imagine myself doing anything else in years. Like I said before in the prior, in like the beginning, I want to be, before I go out, knowing that yes, did my I did what I wanted to do. I did my dream, and I did it fully, and and I had no regrets.
That is so awesome. Well, I just want to thank you a lot for you giving me the opportunity just to sit down with you and go throughout all of these questions and really know who Slammin Sammy is. Like, it was awesome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Right. All right. Well, I hope you have a very, very good night, and we'll definitely talk soon.
All right. I hope you have a great night too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Well, all right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast interview with Slammin Sammy. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I hope you have a very, very good night, and I will talk to you guys later.